Welcome, 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 LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter to Showcase Live. Thank you, everyone on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter for joining today. I'm really excited about today's broadcast. I have in studio, virtually, Kevin and Noah from Autoscores. Gentlemen, welcome to Showcase Live.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us, Mike.
Morning.
Absolutely, absolutely. So today's broadcast is all about artificial intelligence, which is still, it blows my mind. I think everybody that's watching, listening, that will watch in the future, I can't imagine anyone saying it's not that surprising. It's incredible what's going on. I still don't understand it. And that's why I asked you guys to come on to help me and probably the rest of the world really understand artificial intelligence. Before we get started, though, I would like you guys to take a couple seconds to introduce yourselves. Kevin, you and I actually met via LinkedIn. So thank you, LinkedIn, for this introduction for us. Can you give us an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm never. It never ceases to amaze me, the power of it. Not to give it too much props, but I have made some great quality relationships that way. And yeah, I mean, I think if I trace it back to late summer, I had this opportunity to start working with Noah, CEO and co-founder of Autoscores, which is an AI product for auto retailers. And Noah and I have known each other for a long time. So I had this kind of once in a lifetime. It's funny how, Noah, you and I always work together when it's once in a lifetime opportunities. when we both decided to pack up and work in Spain for a year and teach English. That's where we initially met. And then when this opportunity happened, when I had a chance to kind of take a different course in my career, so. Teamed back up with Noah here, maybe 13, 14 years on. And because of the association with AI, I think I had put something out there on LinkedIn when I started the new role. And Michael reached out because he had this broad interest in emerging technologies and just putting that out there, helping folks to understand things that could be beneficial in their careers and in their businesses. And I talked to Noah about, hey, maybe we could talk to Michael and talk a little bit more about the practical applications of AI in the world today. And the rest is history. Here we are. So Noah, if you want to give a little bit more on your background, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I graduated from a small liberal arts school in Orlando, Florida called Rollins College with a double major in mathematics and computer science. It was something I did not necessarily because I was into that stuff. It was because I really wanted to avoid writing papers. That was the impetus at the time. So I always had a predisposition to mathematics. I liked how objective it was. It wasn't subjective like papers. And I really took to it. And I continued my education. I had a jaunt in industry. Working, of all things, kind of artificial intelligence in video games. And that was kind of a foreshadowing of what I was going to do in the future, because I ended up doing my master's degree in Colorado State University, again in computer science, doing a lot of work on various subfields of artificial intelligence like image recognition, machine learning, and ended up parlaying that, which is essentially, the background of a data scientist, into co-founding this company with a close friend of mine who's a second generation car guy. And we built this company and continuing to build it and really enjoying it. So I'm hoping to not debunk myths, but sort of just put things in practical layman terms so people understand how artificial intelligence is being used, because it is becoming very prevalent. And not really in a way people should be fearful of it or anything, but it's just being used, and hopefully I can help and answer some questions for people.
Okay, and that's beautiful, especially because what you just said about people feeling fearful and scared and Big Brother watching, that's what everybody seems to be. A lot of people I talk to, they attribute AI to Big Brother. So we'll get into that. before we get started, I do want to make mention that if anybody out there on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter have questions, go ahead and post those. We will be watching for those. And if we can get those questions on, we will definitely get those on. If we can't get those on, we'll follow up with you afterwards and make sure that your questions are answered. So, Noah, what exactly is AI, artificial intelligence? Help us at least understand the basis behind that.
So artificial intelligence is a really, really broad term. I think it conjures up a lot of different images for a lot of different people. I think, at least among my friends that are not in the industry, like people I go to the gym with, that sort of thing, they'll probably be thinking more often of something from a science fiction movie or science fiction, a book of fiction. So in the broadest term, it's really, I would classify it this way, and other people might do it slightly differently. So I'm not going to say this is the way to define it, but broadly speaking, it's some sort of computer program that is doing the task that appears to the observer to be intelligent behavior. So what does that mean? What that means is Excel is a computer program. We use that to crunch numbers. That's probably not anything demonstrating intelligence. However, if you were to look at a video game character navigating a world, or just let's reduce it to Pac-Man, someone going through Pac-Man, that's more of an intelligent sort of paradigm. So really, I would say in layman's terms is if you're doing a task, if a computer program is doing a task that a human could be doing, that's probably a form of artificial intelligence. So it's a very broad thing and can be applied to a lot of different things. And it doesn't necessarily involve robots or this. I think when people think of artificial intelligence, they think of a mind that's thinking, I think, therefore I am, and they think of Isaac Asimov. And in reality, it's more just doing a task that potentially a human could be doing. I mean, classically, they say it's a program demonstrating intelligence. Whereas we demonstrate natural intelligence, it's demonstrating artificial intelligence. But real simple, it's a computer program doing a task that potentially a human could be doing as well.
So, okay, why is it that we're hearing more and more about it? And I know evolution of technology will naturally allow us more information, more access to artificial intelligence. Why are we hearing more about it now than what seems like, especially for 2021, in the first 2 months, we're hearing a lot about it. Why now versus ever before?
Well, I think one of the biggest drivers is the amount of data that we've been collecting over the past, decades. But we have a data problem, not a problem. We have a surplus of data. And data is a buzzword. And I know it doesn't mean much to anybody. It's like, oh, data, what does that mean? So let me put it in practical terms. A few years ago, there were over 8 million data centers in the world. Now, what's a data center? A data center is a massive warehouse filled with racks of computers that stores information, in addition to doing computation and stuff. But imagine it being a building full of hard drives, a warehouse full of hard drives. And it could be a warehouse. It could be Amazon-sized warehouse. These things are the fancy ones are built, closer to the Arctic Circle so they can save costs on cooling all this electronic equipment. So we have 8 million physical structures, 8 million plus, whose job is just to hold information. All right. That's not everything, but that's indicative of what we've been collecting. The issue when you have so much data is there's no amount of time for any army of humans to go through that and make sense of it, regardless of what the question is, whether it's meteorological, like, looking at climate change data, whether it's looking at financial records, whatever it could be, medical stuff. There's just too much and not enough people. And to be honest, the amount of information being collected, probably we can't fit in our heads to solve the questions we're trying to solve. So that's really why artificial intelligence, in my opinion, has really grown, because it's the tool that people can use, the data scientists can use to find insight in this mountains and mountains and petabytes of information that a human doesn't have the time and probably the capacity really to make sense of.
So when they're mining through all this and figuring it out, is there like a human or somebody saying we need to figure something out with this? Like, is somebody setting up the requirements on the front end to pull data to kind of analyze and do something with it? Or is it all just data that's kind of manipulated and managed different ways? I keep going back to, and I'm probably being ridiculous as I think about this, the movies and how computers and the systems and the robots, even though you said that it's not really tied in with robots, I'm thinking that they're managing and manipulating. I'm not a conspiracy theorist where I think that the robots are going to take over the world, but there's a lot of movies about that. What's happening with the data? Like, what are they doing with it when they're storing it and manipulating it and managing it and analyzing it?
Well, once we developed the ability to store so much data cheaply because of the cost of hard drives going down, which if you think back, if you owned a computer in the 90s, was like a 200. I bought my first computer in the 90s was a compact Presario, and that had a 200 megabyte hard drive, 200 megabytes, which I was told you're never going to need more information. You're never going to need more storage than that ever, right? And now I can record a video on my phone that's like 5 times that or something. So our capacity to store information went up cheaply. As a result of that, people just started saying, if I can attach a sensor to something, if I can record something, why not? Let's do it. There's not a cost. There's not a high cost associated with it. So whether it's individuals, whether it's organizations, whether it's in the academic community, the business community, let's just save this and see if there's something useful we can find about in the future. Now, in terms of where the artificial intelligence comes in and what they're doing with it, is it guided? Of course it's guided. The first thing you'll learn if you take a computer science course or a programming course is if you tell the computer, walk off the cliff, it's never going to question you. It's just going to walk off the cliff. It follows commands that the programmer's putting in there.
Right.
So what's happening is data scientists, programmers are being told by the people investing money in what they're doing. So let's say I'm part of a global, let's say, climate change committee, and I want to figure out what's going into climate change and what are the influences and stuff. Well, the organizers, the leaders of that group are going to get a group of data scientists and programmers and say, we have access to this data. We've been, whatever it may be, let's say it's just atmospheric readings that they have over the past 15 years. Let's go in there and can you identify any insights in that? And I know that's very broad, but a lot of times they don't even know what they're looking for, but they're just saying, hey, I want to find some factors. So then these data scientists and programmers get together and they say, all right, we're going to author a program using, creating novel tools ourselves and using existing tools that basically is saying it's a directed program to say, hey, I want to identify insights in this data. It can be simple as something as, can we cluster this data in any way? Are we able to cluster it in a way where, for example, we can see instances of CO2 levels that are higher in this group of readings versus this group, or can we identify where CO2, this is probably more in line with what they're doing. Can we identify, without looking at CO2 levels, where the CO2 levels would be higher based on all these other things that we're looking at, whether it's population, number of cars in the area, industry, and so forth. So really, it's kind of, for a lot of people, it's kind of bland, very like perfunctory kind of things. It's just done at such a huge scale, you have to write a program to do it. And just the fact that it's a program that's sifting through and applying, certain techniques that are part of artificial intelligence, there's really no like sentient agent that is on its own independently making decisions. It's really just finding patterns in data and finding patterns in massive amounts of data that would be impossible for me to find or Kevin to find or you to find, opening up Excel. It's just not two-dimensional data. Excel is 2 dimensions. You've got rows and columns. This stuff can be n-dimensional, and that might be
Yeah, like
getting a little too
structured
nerdy.
versus unstructured.
Yeah.
I was going to give an example. I was talking to a buddy of mine who used to work together, and healthcare is going to be an interesting place. We'll see with the regulations, kind of what happens, but they're an industry that's kind of a laggard in their migrations, really technology migrations in general, not necessarily in how health care is being provided, but more in the administration and the behind the scenes and the way the business is being conducted. They're not rushing off into the cloud, for example, with all that data, because there are government regulations about the amount of time that patient history needs to be on record. Actually, where geographically that data can be stored and who can have access to it for HIPAA and all sorts of privacy reasons and things like that. So a lot of these, because of the pandemic right now, they're seeing certain industries are seeing a boom, say like the data storage in industry or just storage in general, where you saw a whole bunch of this stuff that was put in from say on premises in a data center somewhere, which would be these racks and racks of like storage equipment. To a lot of industries are pushing that off to the cloud because it's a lot cheaper to do it up. Well, not necessarily cheaper, but for various reasons moving to the cloud. But in healthcare, it's not. And one of the things they're doing as a result of the pandemic, because there's so much more video consultation, that's all just being recorded. So if you think about going back to Noah's point of n dimensions, that's that unstructured data that really, it's not tabular, it's not relational, it's just video, it's just pictures. And so over like right now, that's all being recorded because if you're going to see a doctor in an office, they're sitting there typing on their keyboard. That's not being recorded when you're sitting there. You're not on video when you're in a doctor's office or when you're at the hospital. But now these this telehealth, telemedicine stuff is because no one said why not, right? That's the easiest way for us to have record of exactly what's said. Maybe lower liability as a result because it's not somebody's version of what was said or what happened. It's literally what happened there in video form. And so that's just a recent example of the explosion. If you think about the amount of data that's being generated by video, and who's to say what's going to happen with that? And there might be a lot of innovation that's going to come as a result of what's going on right now, the pandemic in that space too.
It's amazing. It's truly amazing. So I was doing some research before this. What is the difference between AI, or is there a difference between AI and machine learning? How do they?
So machine learning is a subfield of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence would be your broadest umbrella that covers a bunch of stuff. And machine learning is a more specific subset. It deals with kind of the example I was talking about, which is identifying. It can be used for a lot of things, but it's identifying patterns in massive amounts of data based on a training set. So any sort of artificial intelligence algorithm or program that involves taking a set of data, whether it's labeled or not, and giving it to this program to study in hopes that it can solve a problem with fresh data is a form of machine learning. There's also another form of machine learning that involves giving feedback to a program based on how it performs, and that's also a form of machine learning. So a great example is, even though they also will call it image recognition, but identifying photos. So let's go with the example of video. Kevin was saying that we're recording all this video. Well, are we going to have a small army of people that go through hours and hours and days and months and years of video footage? Probably not.
Right.
Does Google, when you search for a cat in Google image search, did Google actually have an army of people look through the internet and find all these images of cats and say, yep, that's a cat, make sure it shows up in the image? No, absolutely not. They wrote programs to do this. So you can write a program to identify things in video. You can write a program to identify images. That's a form of machine learning, because more often than not, what they're going to do is they're going to write a program and they're going to say, and there's I mean, I can go into the details of what goes on in the program, but simply put, I'm going to get a bunch of images of cats, feed it into the program, and the program's going to analyze that. And I want to, in this case, I'll tell them, hey, these are cats.
Mm-hmm.
And then the hope is, if I give it enough examples, it's going to be able to identify the characteristics and features that make up a cat. So that when I give it a fresh set of images that it has not seen before,
mm-hmm.
it's going to successfully identify which are cats and which are not cats. Okay. So that's an example of how machine learning works. If for the people that are real nerdy, I'm just going to say real quick, there's supervised learning, there's unsupervised learning, and there's reinforcement learning. Those are the three main categories.
There's deep learning too, right?
Huh?
Deep learning too?
Well, that deep learning can take the form of any of those.
I see.
Okay. But yeah, that's what they are. Supervised is with labeled data, unsupervised is without labeled data, and reinforcement is the idea of telling the program each time it tries something how good or bad it did, and then it's going to adjust over time to hopefully get a better result. So it's very much mimicking, simply put, kind of how humans learn. That's the thought process. It's like, if I touch the fire, I get a reaction. I know it's really bad, so hopefully I learn never to touch the fire again, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of where machine learning is. Where, just to give you an example of artificial intelligence without it, if you were to play a video game, that's not machine learning. We didn't give it a training set to teach it how to play basketball or to teach it, how to shoot the gun back at you if you're playing Call of Duty. That's just programmed behavior in terms of how to react in these different situations. It has nothing to do with anything that it learned.
So I think I saw somewhere that Google built something machine learning where they had 1 billion different data points that has learned so much. Maybe I read it just passing, but I thought I saw something where it's artificial intelligence with machine learning, and it's been building and learning to the point where it can have different options, almost like a human can react. Are we there yet? Are we there?
I think we're very far away from. I mean, far away is relative, but there's a lot of things that we don't know about the human brain. I think we can get to the point. I think we actually did. I remember there's a viral article at least in the scientific community about 2 chatbots. So I think we're at the point where you could, with natural language recognition, that you could have a chat and have a hard time discerning whether it was actual human or not. The viral article is that they actually put 2 of the artificial intelligence bots in the same room and they had them talking to one another, which is kind of existentially kind of interesting. But I mean, honestly, if you look at guys like Google and Facebook and these huge companies, they're like their own countries that have, I don't know how much data that they're looking. I mean, they're trying to make sense of it. And to say it has 1 million data points is yeah, it certainly could. And data point could be one of 2 things. It could be the dimension of a row of data, or it could be just the number of rows in whatever they're looking at. I know a lot of these companies are trying to sift through your shopper behavior, for example, to anticipate what you might be in the market for. I know within the automotive industry, which I'm a part of with Kevin, there are companies that create software for auto dealers so that they can identify, hey, I have a CRM filled with all my potential customers. Which one of them are actually in the market for a car? So I can have my sales team call them instead of just cold calling a bunch of people. That's an example of that being used. So it's. I think for my parents' generation, it's unnerving the amount of information companies have about us.
Yeah.
The truth is, whenever we accept the terms of service on anything, we're giving away our data, and there's a huge discussion in the community about obviously not only the ethics, but are we entitled to, compensation as customers? Because this data can be turned into revenue for companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, who was the Democratic candidate that campaigned this year? Was it? I just don't want to say a name.
I'm not going to say
Andrew Yang.
Okay.
Andrew Yang.
Oh yeah,
He's a big advocate for the idea. I mean, he's proposing the idea, at least, of maybe if you guys are getting customer data that's being used in your projects, just because we did the terms of service we accepted, maybe people should be compensated for that to some degree.
Well, yeah,
I'm not saying I'm in favor of that, yay or nay. I'm just saying that's something that's been raised in the industry.
We are the product.
Yeah.
The customers are the advertisers.
So.
All right. So I do want to get into Autoscores because I think what you guys have built is incredible. But before we even get into that side of it, what are some other examples of where AI is being used, and what are some what are some misconceptions even of AI? Because I know I brought up a couple, but are there others that people are just fearful of, and they're putting tinfoil around their house to avoid that? What have you guys?
Again, so I think we're very far away from sentient robots that are going to tell us what to do because, they don't have the human weaknesses or whatever they like to talk about in these science fiction shows. I think it's a little harder for me because I'm in the field and I know what's fact, and I guess I know it's possible, for example, this is kind of a side topic, but people talk about, I remember there's a time, and we hear about this all the time, right? Passwords getting compromised. So, I log into chase.com or I go to Bank of America. If hackers somehow could guess my password, that's terrible, right? They're going to have access. So, right now, as long as you choose a strong password, a strong password, I'm just going to say is, at least 12 characters and is a mixture of letters, numbers, and special characters. You could throw any program, artificial intelligence, whatever you want, and it would take years, not years, hundreds and thousands of years for it to come up with your password. And that's assuming that it could actually enter your password every second or even every half a second and get a result to be like, nope, yes, no, 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 no. And it keeps doing it, right? It's not possible. That's why when you hear people talk about quantum computing, that's kind of the security industry is worried about that, because quantum computers have the potential to process at such a factor faster than our current silicon chips can, that you could brute force passwords open that way. So that point being said is people worry about password security. The reason passwords are compromised are human error. Either because me, dumb Noah, ended up using password 123 as his password, or the company storing the password made a mistake in how it stored the password. Meaning, if you just stored password 123 or whatever it is in that format, if that system is compromised, then those passwords are public, and those are those data breaches you hear of. The thing is there are techniques that most companies should adhere to that actually hide the password. So if you log, and this is kind of a quick plug for Autoscores, we in fact do that. If you come up with a password to log into our platform, we don't know what that password is. We actually obfuscate that and store that. So it means if we looked at the raw information that we have saved, or a hacker happened to look at it, they wouldn't know what your password is, and they wouldn't be able to reverse engineer it in any way. So a lot of times the stuff we hear about is actually more benign, and it tends to be like, oh, we're the dumbasses, not the program.
So I have a really good example, and this kind of goes back to like a former life, a former chapter of my career, which wasn't that long ago. But I worked for a company that was focused on basically building out the automated infrastructure for anything that could be considered software, and anything that could be developed as software, whether it was the software that you use to build other software, or it was a mobile application, a website, what have you. So we focused a lot on the automation of testing of the quality assurance process to make sure that before you put a product out there that it's not buggy. It's not the data is accurate. It's not corrupt in any sort of way. Corrupted. Politicians are corrupt. Data can be corrupted. Or maybe the other way around. But you guys get the point. So I followed, and I'm up here in New England. I live in I'll keep that private, but I live in the area right around Boston, and obviously there's a bunch of innovation going on in across all verticals in New England. So there were some tech companies that were starting up. This one company called Bowie Health that I had learned about, and more people might know about it now than they would have a couple of years ago. But they've boomed over during this pandemic period, because what they do is that phenomenon I think that we all are familiar with is and maybe we've all wised up to it now, and we know to kind of settle down a little bit. But you have an ache or a pain or something in your side around your rib cage, just for example. So then you Google it, aching rib cage, or pain in my side of my stomach, and then next thing you know, a slippery slope, and you have insert the worst terminal disease here. That's what you think that you have, and you start to freak out about it, and you can't, and there's this huge gap between that and what a doctor or a health professional is going to tell you. But there's often these, life gets in the way between what you feel that and you're like, no, I really need to go to the doctor. So this company basically was able to kind of bridge that gap with AI based upon how people are answering questions that they serve up to them. They say, okay, yeah, the likelihood that this is the high likelihood what you're dealing with right here. And then it can give guidance on what your next step should be. Should you maybe you can just call the nurse line that comes free with your insurance that you get from your company, or maybe you should go to urgent care. Maybe it's not an emergency situation, but you can imagine the application during the onset and even currently with COVID-19 when people start feeling those symptoms. So this company Bowie Health has become the official, and they're partnering with all sorts of large insurance companies, as well as employers, as well as state governments across the country, to be the official place where people can go and say, okay, I'm experiencing these symptoms. I might have or I might not have, and then so you can imagine what's being offloaded on the healthcare system, that's already stressed to the max by people that are able to, figure out, hey, that I don't have COVID-19, or it's you know what I'm saying? So that's a great example, a practical example of artificial intelligence. I think that ties into, current times.
Yeah, and just to further the point, like it's, for example, there is people when you read MRIs. So you go and you get an MRI scan, and that's traditionally read by a tech, and then the tech kind of makes his or her kind of assessment and then passes that on to the doctor, and the doctor reads it and passes that on to you. Well, now there's situations where there'll be actually an artificial intelligence system that reads the report, identifies what it thinks is important, and then the doctor or the tech, but some human, will then review that and then come up with the ultimate diagnosis. The beauty of artificial intelligence is the fact that it takes all the knowledge we have as humans that we've acquired through whatever domain specific it might be, whether it's in the medical field, the financial sector, anything. Yeah. And it allows us to impart our wisdom into that program and allow the program to then evaluate things without having the bias that comes from being human. And that bias, think about what Kevin just described. It's emotionally charged to be looking at, symptoms and what they could potentially be. It's emotionally charged if you're managing millions or billions of dollars in a hedge fund.
Yeah.
A lot of people find the thrill in that. But if you're a person seeking optimal outcome, you actually want someone, or you want an entity, to be as emotionless as possible. And that's the beauty, I think, of what artificial intelligence can bring to some of these scenarios, is the fact that it can take our knowledge, because it didn't know it to begin with. We're the ones telling it, if this, then that, so to speak, for lack of a better term. But it's able to do it without taking into account that, oh, I have a family relationship with this person, or, oh, the stock market just went up and I think it'll go up tomorrow. But that's emotion. That's not looking at all the factors and literally playing the percentages perfectly.
Yeah.
And that's why, I don't think anyone can beat a chess program now. They solve chess. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'm going to win because I want to make the perfect move based on the situation, even if my gut tells me something else.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. So before we wrap up, I do want to talk about Autoscores, because from when I'm talking with Kevin, Noah, talking with you about Autoscores, it's impressive. So I want everyone to understand what you guys have built.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the audience, it's what's cool is it's just another example of how it can be applied. It's something that's being done in a lot of other sectors. It's something to be aware of when you're shopping for airline tickets, because the airline companies are doing the same thing. Basically, what we do is, as shopping online is ubiquitous. Everyone shops online. So the ability for a business, a retail business, brick and mortar, to study their customers is getting less and less, because people are going online more and more. I mean, we're actually seeing brick and mortar businesses go out of business because Amazon is just literally muscling them out, because in terms of a customer experience, what's easier than pulling up your phone, finding the item you want, and having it literally delivered to your house probably a day or two later? So this concierge kind of expectation now from customers is at least in the United States and in Europe, for where this stuff is more prevalent, yes, and culturally we've accepted it, so as a result, a lot of times customers doing research on an item, for example, in this case, buying a car, they're doing that research online. They're not getting in their car and driving to the Toyota store on the corner, and then the Honda store, and then the Chevy store to take a look at what's around. They're doing a Google search and they're finding the cars in their area, and they're doing it that way. What that means is auto dealers are kind of more in the dark with regard to how customers are reacting to their inventory. What do they like? What do they dislike? Before, these people would be showing up on their lot and they would be able to actually get a sense, because they'd be sizing them up. Just like a Starbucks barista is really good at sizing up the customers coming in to buy coffee or tea, because they've been doing it and they've had hundreds and thousands of interactions with humans, and they actually can read people's signals. So what we do is we essentially take that very old school concept and apply it to the new school setting. Our product essentially has two parts. One part is the data collection part, which is what we talked about at the beginning. It's all about collecting some sort of data to extract insight. So we live on the auto dealer's website. So if you go to an auto dealer website that's a customer's of ours, we're there, and we're just kind of sitting there quietly and watching what you do, how you browse the inventory, what you do when you get to a car, what do you click on, and what order do you click on stuff. And we collect that. Just so you know, we don't know your name. We don't know your phone number. We don't know social security number. We actually, as a company policy, we want you to be anonymous. You are shopper 1, and then the next person shopper 2. We don't care about who you are. There's actually legal stuff that goes along with collecting data that would identify you. And quite frankly, we don't need it. And That's probably overdone, in my opinion, in the industry. People are too overzealous in collecting some stuff. We just want to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because what we want to do is we want to use the second part of our product, which is what they log into. It's a web application. So someone at the auto dealership would log into Autoscores, and they can look at their entire inventory. So they can look at all their cars. So if they got 100 cars on the lot, they can look at all their cars. And we will tell them how likely those vehicles are to sell in the next 7 days for the most part, based on what we've seen from their customers. And what's cool about this is it allows them to know what's going to happen before these customers really walk in the door. Because the people are doing their research on a big ticket item that happens at home, on their couch, on their sofa, in their bed, on their phone, on their computer, wherever. And we're the ones studying them. And then we let the dealer know, hey, you got a bunch of people, not just viewing the car. Because for a long time, the industry just thought, oh, if people look at the car, that's a good thing. No, we actually are studying what they're doing. Because you can have a bunch of people that showed up to a car, but they're really window shoppers. Mm-hmm. Or you can have a bunch of people show up that are really interested. So we let them know, and we advise them on how they should adjust the prices of their inventory so that they make sure the vehicles that are attracting a strong demand from customers at home before they walk in, make sure they're optimally priced. So yes, they will raise the price of vehicles, which is great for them, not so great for the customer if you want to get the vehicle very cheap. But what ends up happening is they're optimizing their prices based on customer demand, which, by the way, is what airlines are doing each and every day when you buy a ticket, whether it's from American, Delta, or you go to an aggregate like Kayak. So we're basically, by you looking at the car online, it's, the dealer knows you were there, but more importantly, we tell them not how many people are interested, because they just want to know if the car is going to sell or not. So we're studying the customer and then advising price recommendations, which, just like the example of reading the MRI scan, we give our recommendations, but all our dealers still at this point, they haven't turned control over to us completely. They then use their own knowledge, what they're trying to do goal-wise with their company to make the final call. So we do this heavy lifting in the background.
Yeah.
To think through all this stuff that honestly the dealer probably wouldn't know what to make sense of. And we tell them how to adjust the price of their inventory, among other things. But that's the feature, and then that's the platform in a nutshell.
And there's also, you're giving the dealer the opportunity to adjust their inventory, not just the price, but the inventory. Because if they have a car that they think should sell but doesn't, don't bring more in. Bring more in of a different one.
Well, if we actually alert the dealer if there's a vehicle that our system, we actually tell them, hey, we think this vehicle should have sold by now. Can you take a look at it for us? Can you talk to your sales team about it? And that's to catch those weird situations where, let's say someone, it had 3 test drives, but whenever you get that engine running for a couple minutes, this weird odor comes out of the vents. That's not something you're going to see online. The vehicle looks beautiful online, but if something turning the customer away at the point of sale, because there's a discrepancy with how it's being showcased online to what the customer sees, it's going to result in that. And we're actually going to tell the dealer. So then they'll do a walk around and they'll inspect the car. And 9 times out of 10, they'll be like, "Oh, I'll be damned! Look what happened. This, there's something going on here that we didn't know about."
Yeah, they're like, wait a minute. You did not smell the funk of that car from 1,000 miles away. So, yeah, it's been funny to see. But no, this would be an example of machine learning, right? Like, I think the way that I think about it is, when we first sign up a new customer, we have the snippet that's collected. It's basically observing the actions and patterns of actions that shoppers are taking when they drill down into the detail page of any vehicle they want to look at. It's in that website's inventory. And initially, as you might expect, when we first dropped that snippet, that JavaScript code onto the website, we don't have any data. We're collecting it over time, so we need a certain amount of data in order for it to be. I don't know what this scientific term would be, Noah, but enough for it's like a critical mass of data that we need to have to be able to feed into the machine learning model, that AI model, before whatever it spits out would be I guess, statistically significant. Or, we could have any level of confidence, right, that the predictions that we are then going to make going forward are actually going to be accurate. So initially we have no observations that we've observed. Somebody's clicking here, somebody's hovering here, somebody's starting to fill out a form, but they didn't finish it. They clicked on things in this order. Like, that has a big impact on things as well. You could click on 5 different things, but depending on the order in which you click on them, that can be indicative of, in aggregate, the things that happen leading up to a vehicle that then sold within the next 7 days. So over time, because it's a machine learning model, we are collecting more and more and more and more data. And I'd say we have some long-time customers that, how many data points have we analyzed, Noah? Millions, right?
Yeah, millions upon millions. I mean, like anything, storage is so cheap that we never limited it. We just like, let's collect everything and we'll figure out what's useful. But you're correct. We're using machine learning, and what we're studying is what people are doing. And it takes about 30 days for us to have seen enough examples in order for us to make predictions on the future, which is how any of this works. And so it's a little interesting for customers because it's not a product that turns on right away, but it's something that after 30 days, it becomes that dealer's ally, because it does a lot of heavy lifting in the background, looking through a bunch of information that the dealer doesn't have the time or the skill set to look at, and spits out something very, very actionable, which is, hey, this car is attracting a lot of interest. Consider raising it $500.
Yeah.
Or this thing is not attracting interest. Consider lowering it. And it's doing it based off customer behavior, which we found is way more accurate at gauging outcomes with vehicles. Because at the end of the day, and I always say this, I'll keep saying it even though everyone rolls their eyes, but it's like, people buy cars. The market doesn't buy cars. You know what I mean? It's like, and dealers talk about the market because it's like, oh, well, I want to make sure I have the cheapest car in my area. Well, yeah, but what you care about is, what people care about is buying the car they want at the right price.
Yeah.
So we can tell you that there are a bunch of people that like what they're seeing. Doesn't matter if it's the cheapest or not. It's got its own unique story, and that's what's calling. That's what's speaking to the person. And by the way, that's what salespeople are doing anytime they're selling a story. So it's really I don't want to make it sound more complicated than it is. It's really just taking fundamental machine learning concepts, a concept that's already been done before, which is studying customer behavior. It just hasn't been done in the automotive space. And we're doing something that auto dealers really haven't done before in order to tell them something extremely useful. And it's something that takes the dealer maybe 5 to 10 minutes a day. That's it. In terms of, we're not asking him much. We're going to do this work. We're going to spit out a little report, and you make your actions and move and do what you enjoy doing, which is buying and selling cars.
Yep.
To put a bow on that point here, I think that'll tie it all together. Is you can bet. So I want to put a plug in here for our customers and hopefully our prospective customers. I mean, automobile dealers. If you think about what they mean to their communities across the country, it's huge. Mm-hmm. They support their communities. They're integral in their communities. And they are in a lot of ways, they're seeing this wave coming at them, in similar ways that you might have that say the taxi industry didn't see Uber coming at them. Right. Or retailers, brick and mortar retailers didn't see Amazon. I mean, there are all these examples. Blockbuster, didn't see Netflix. So. What we're saying is there's some other folks that are out there that are really advocates of the automobile industry, because the amount of tax revenue that comes in from them, I mean, how integral they are to communities, it can't be overstated. So we're trying to give them a tool to help them. They don't have to be afraid of technology. They can use it to their advantage to operate in similar ways that otherwise, they probably don't have the team of, crack data scientists internally that are going to develop this sort of thing themselves.
Right.
However, they have a lot of data, right? They've invested a lot. They have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of equity, a lot of brand recognition, a lot of marketing dollars that goes into bringing people to their website. This is their data,
Yeah.
right? And we're helping them to actually leverage that to in a unique way to their distinct competitive advantage, as opposed to because companies like the big companies, like say the CarMaxes of the world, the Carvanas of the world, the Vrooms of the world, they don't have the overhead, the built-in overhead, right? That say these automobile dealers across the nation do.
True.
And they're going to be starting off in the cloud, and they're going to be using AI out of the gates, and you can bet that they're leveraging these sorts of things to their advantage. So this is a way that this is one of the many products. I mean, we have a lot of great contemporaries out there in the marketplace that are doing a lot of great things for dealers to help them, to help them really kind of combat what's coming after them in terms of the technology. So,
excellent, gentlemen. Thank you both. And if anybody needs more information, wants to learn more about Autoscores, reach out to both Kevin and Noah, or go to their website, autoscores.com. Guys, thank you again for coming on, joining, and spending time and helping people understand the power of our artificial intelligence, the differentiators between that and machine learning and what's going on, the evolution. I almost would like you guys, I want you guys to come back maybe either later this year or next year and kind of regroup and see what the evolution has taken and where it's gone in a year. So I look forward to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great, Michael. Thanks for putting it on.
If anyone has a question just about this talk and about artificial intelligence in general, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to answer your questions or potentially point you to resources that for the nerdy ones out there that go into depth if you want that, because I tried to rein myself in. Once you get me going, I'll start talking about unsupervised, supervised, reinforcement learning. Everyone's like, what? But it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having us on.
Yes.
I hope your audience got something positive out of it.
Very good. Thank you. And for everyone out there on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, thank you for joining. This broadcast it has been recorded and will show up on LinkedIn. It will show up on my YouTube channel, Showcase Broadcast Studios. If you have not subscribed, please do subscribe. And it's also on my Twitter account. And there's more recordings coming out, more broadcasts, live interviews coming out in the near future, some really fun ones. So stay tuned for those as well. Gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well.
Take care.
Are we still live?
Big studio.